Hello, Matt. Thank you for being here today on the show. So excited for our conversation.
Hi, Rose. Thanks again. Thanks for having me. And also, to the audience out there, Rose is amazing. Any other guests who want to come on? Rose is a consummate professional, was very patient with me and my crazy life schedule after we first met. So life just started to life on me. So thank you, Rose.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Thank you. And to get started with our conversation today, I know earlier we were talking about one of the messages that you especially would like to share with listeners today is the realistic, expectations of being an entrepreneur. So to kick off our conversation, could you tell us one aspect of entrepreneurship that most people wouldn't expect or know about?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's actually a really great question. So there's a lot of them. Um, but I'll just use kind of our podcast as an example. So we originally connected. I was kind of being brought on as a co-founder for a really cool company. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share their information since I'm kind of be backing away. But happy to, if somebody reaches out, happy to talk about it. But I was just talking. We were talking this call, which is like the natural, and it's just quoting out to Hormozy, the natural evolution of every business in the world eventually becomes sell everything to everyone. And since that is impossible, okay, once you launch your business and you actually get some feedback, it's like, well, what else can I sell to my customers? Because there's a business lesson in there. Then it's always easier to sell more to your existing customers and then go get new ones. And so eventually you have to find this balance of like, what am I personally capable of doing and performing, and how do I cull away certain opportunities to stay focused on my mission and vision that I set out to originally accomplish on my entrepreneurial journey, and which of course is going to change drastically when you enter the marketplace. And there is no right answer, which is also, I guess, another lesson, especially for college kids. I was on a call with a couple of guys who were wanting to get entrepreneurship, wanting to get in the private equity world, and I think the biggest lesson, especially for college kids, is that it's not like school. There isn't a right or wrong answer when you're in this world. Like, so I guess the summary, the big lesson is there is no right or wrong answer. It's just what is aligned with your end goal that you're trying to build for your life and business. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, definitely. That's really interesting because I think that's one thing that students especially can relate to. The more you learn and the more experiences you have, the more you realize, the more you start to question, okay, like what is actually the right decision to make in this moment? As you broaden your worldview, as you broaden your experiences and you enter new markets and learn new skill sets
Launch.
and yeah, and launch new projects and business pursuits, you realize that there's no right way to do it. There's no linear journey to success, especially in entrepreneurship. So thank you for sharing that because that is a critical piece of insight that especially those starting out for the first time should definitely keep in mind. They should know, they should learn, and they should use going forward when they go on
Yeah.
to launch their first business. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that,
And
Matt.
also on that, you actually made a really great, interesting comment that you don't even realize when you said like, well, what is success? I mean, okay, what is success even? Like that's even a lesson in of itself. Again, there's no right answer. Like people listening to this podcast, one version of success to somebody might be a lifestyle business, which for the newer entrepreneurs, it's you make it a couple 100,000 a year, maybe a couple million gross. Your take home is you're having a good, comfortable lifestyle. You're working maybe 10, 20 hours a week. You got a small team, everything's outsourced. Like you're not trying to go pedal to the metal. You're not trying to do hockey stick growth. That might looks like success to one entrepreneur, which is again not right or wrong. And another person out there, somebody's trying to launch the next Facebook, the next Google, somebody's trying to create the next major technological movement. That is a 80, 100-hour work week grind for the next 2 decades, 3 decades of your life and sacrifice everything in pursuit of the business. And if you're not a unicorn, which is like $1 billion valuation, you failed. And neither one of those businesses, but those are two diametrically opposed businesses, have two very different pathways, two very different realistic lifestyles of what the business actually is like and living that life as that entrepreneur. And neither are wrong. Both are perfectly successful, quote unquote, businesses, but what's right, what's wrong, I don't know. That's your decision to make. So anyway, I know especially when I was in college all three times. I dropped out three times, by the way. Some myself when I was 16, it's just you're in school, you're taught this is right, this is wrong, this is 2 + 2 = 4. It's just there's no gray area. And that was a really big adjustment for me. It's just like determining my own path is just what is the outcome? What do you want? I don't know. And the fun part is too, what you think you want when you start is not always what you end up with or where
Mm.
you end up in life. So just be flexible and just really willing to adjust. And I think that's the biggest lesson for entrepreneurs is like you're just gonna anyway, 1,000 lessons there. I'm gonna shut up now so you can continue because we don't have 3 hours to get into all the nuance of everything.
No, thank you so much for sharing that because that is really a powerful truth for our audience to really know, learn, and understand and really believe because you're absolutely right. There's never a right or wrong answer. And going forward, you grow as you continue to push forward in your journey and as time goes on and as you mentioned, kind of progress through launching your business, building your business, growing your business. What you want in the beginning is not what you end up wanting in the end. Your goals can change and what you see as success can especially evolve throughout the journey. So thank you so much for bringing up that really important point. And
1,000%.
so yeah, definitely. And something I would love to touch on is to dive a little bit into your story. What was your background like prior to launching your companies? I know you mentioned you dropped out 3 times to have the resilience and
Stay in school, kids.
persistence to keep going. I mean, you that means you tried 3 times, to continue your education.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could just share a little bit about your story.
Um, I'm gonna try to do like the super rich cliff notes
Mhm.
because I mean I'm always the type of person where it's just like again, this is who I am. So, 30 minutes for a podcast is like shoot, I mean, how many hours do you like when I was and the reason also this topic became relevant too, because again, like new information, as you can go meet people, you just life changes. So like I had a great conversation with 3 guys who I was talking about earlier, I think in the kind of the pre-recording for this. They want to get a private equity. Like, hey guys, like this is the reality of what it's like in getting entrepreneurship. And it's like a 3 hour long fire hose them. It's just like, this is what it's like. Like, whoa, this is a lot. This is really good information, but at least now what we're going into. Because my story is one of jumping out of airplanes and building parachutes on the way down. And it's just how I spent most of my life. And I didn't have anybody to kind of like lay out the groundwork, like, hey, this is like what you're walking into. Here's the roadmap. Like you're in for a lot of difficulty, a lot of heartache, a lot of incredible moments that like very few people on the planet can relate to. Cause like I still remember I was talking to and it was a networking event this morning, talking about how I will never forget the first time I had an employee working for me. My wife and I, we had just hired our first employee. This was our first real business. Yeah, just that memory is very important. So, story is some of myself were boarding school at 16, early college program got shut down. Don't get me started on education and underfunding like the brightest minds. And so I realized like I'm above average intelligence, but I'm like I didn't have I had the ego the size of Montana. I didn't study hard enough. Neither of the 3 times I was there. Um, Realized I had to do something. So I came an art dealer on cruise ships. Spent about a year traveling the world doing that. Went and came back home. One of my best friends I've known since middle school passed away 3 weeks after being home. So relationships became very important to me. Was at a public speaking job in Salt Lake, met my now wife. We started seeing each other, moved to Michigan for to be a jet broker, got super depressed and miserable, like on the peak of my sales career. Like, what am I gonna do with my life now? Because again, like I want to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't listening to that gut. Which is a journey that I keep getting brought back to being an entrepreneur, like because I have no other path. It was the only way for me. Anyway, super depressed for a while. Came back to Kansas City, started a small e-commerce company. No idea what I was doing. Wife was cleaning houses basically to go back and forth between Michigan and here. She hurt her shoulder. I was like, she had to shut it down or grow. So I'm like, cool. I shut my company down, helped her out. We started hiring employees. We got us into commercial work, got in multiple different services. Eventually tried to exit a couple times, which is a fun story too, which is now another venture I'm starting because like I didn't exit my company when I should have, when profits were good, emotions were tolerable, but we were starting to kind of get that like, I don't really know if I want to stay in this forever. And that was a lesson. I didn't. And it's just, things go sideways on you. So anyway, started exiting a couple times, ended up buying another company, going deeper down the rabbit hole, which is a big lesson too. Start businesses you don't mind actually fulfilling. That's another really big lesson for the entrepreneur, for the college kids out there. Because in the early days, unless you're going and raising millions and millions of dollars of VC capital, when your employee doesn't show up for work, this is the reality. Guess who's doing the job? You are. And we didn't have anybody telling us that. And so we just like, hey, cleaning's easy. Like we can do that. She was doing it, even though she was hurt, and just like, well, we hired employees. They're going to show up for work and do their jobs, right? Guess what? it's not always the case. And, when they're late for work or they're sick, you're the one, it's your reputation, it's your business, you're accountable for delivering the results to your clients. Because business is broken down into three different categories. You have lead generation, you have lead conversion, and then fulfillment. That's all business is. And so when that fulfillment breaks down, guess who's doing it? You are. So anyway,
Yes.
so my story then takes me into property management as a COO, because I was going to sell the company, lost some money through a co-investment with the deal. I was like, hey man, I'm sorry about that. Like I was supposed to operate and things went sideways. Let me come consult for you. That morphed into becoming the COO. We're managing for this big, large fund. They brought managed in house. We started doing some, which again was a major loss opportunity as well, which is like what happens when you lose a big client. It's gut wrenching. Again, coming back to how am I going to write payroll? Like I had a staff of 15 people and I can now only afford eight of them. What do you do? Like this is a reality of being an entrepreneur though. And sometimes you got to be the person like, oh, those people like, hey, I know you got this job because you wanted security, but now it's my responsibility. I'm now responsible for saying, hey, I have to completely disrupt your life. We can't afford to keep you anymore, or you're not making performance standards. We have to now coach with you and work you, help you either, hey, we need to start take a sales guy. Sales guys are always the easiest. Like you're supposed to make 100 calls a week and close two deals a week. They're making 50 calls a week, only closing two deals a month. What do? You got to work with them and understand them. You got to people manage, not fun part of entrepreneurship. So anyway, basically started launching a fund, went down that path, started raising money for real estate deals, got involved in other things, and just like talking to people. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's kind of long and the short of it. Kind of brings us today. I'm condensing because I know we're time short, but it's a
Wow.
lot. My path is doing this just all over the place.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, you just gave us such a great overview of, the different trajectories in your career journey, from jet sales you mentioned to, growing and scaling your own cleaning companies to property management to e-commerce. I mean, you've done so many different or you've had so many different ventures up until today. And so what I'm hearing throughout all of these different experiences and stories is one, it's important to stay adaptable. Situations
Hmm.
change, potentially teams fall through, but at the same time, expectations still need to be met. There are services to be provided, products to be delivered. And number
Hmm.
two, this leads into wearing many hats as an entrepreneur. That is a big, big part of the reality of the role. So I'm really happy that
Yeah.
you brought that up. And finally, three, making tough choices is also a big part of being a leader, of being at the forefront of building something with an impact, building something that's sustainable and scalable. So thank you so much. I mean, you just provided so many different insights there
Hmm.
into the expectations and the responsibilities of entrepreneurs. So to riff on that a little more, could you provide just a glimpse into the average day in your life today? I know you've gone and through many different roles in your entrepreneurial journey, but say this week, what does an average day in your life look like? And potentially, even developing on those 3 points that I mentioned, wearing many hats, making tough choices. Can you give us a glimpse into that reality?
So, okay, so what my day looks like, first to answer that, I have to briefly touch on you have to first understand who you are as a person and what role you want to play in the business. Because every business, especially if you're in the entrepreneurial world, um, you basically need to play to your strengths and outsource or hire for your weaknesses. So
Mm,
my strengths are I'm a really good I like talking to people. Again, this is like just coming back to understanding who you are. Because I can tell you what my week looks like. I'm happy to answer that question, but I think really the nugget, what you're really searching for, the reason you're asking for that is you want to understand and looking for me to help kind of teach the next generation, well, what should their idea look like? And well, honestly, what their week should look like may not necessarily be anything like mine. Like mine is out talking to people all day, doing podcasts, connecting people, ideating things, architecting things. Because like me from a very young age, and I would encourage the audience when you're thinking through what should my ideal look like as an entrepreneur, look back to how were you in elementary school and look for some like initial patterns. Like, because I reason say elementary school, because when you're that young, your brain is just being what your brain is. You don't have this identity, this concept of a self, which is like, oh, I'm good at this, I'm bad at this. It's just like, no, like when I was that young, I loved playing with Bionicles, which were like Lego action figures. And
Mhm.
I loved putting them together until one day I got so good at I don't need the instructions anymore. So I started throwing the instruction set. And I was like, cool, I can do it from memory. That wasn't good enough anymore. Now I have to time myself. So my goal was under 30 seconds. Brought it home, opened it up, threw away the instruction set, assembled it in 22 seconds flat. And then I played for about 10. And then I set it aside and I never touched it again. And that pattern has played out so many times in my life. And every time I ignored that pattern, we're like, my life, my businesses suffer. I become a less effective leader. And so it took me a long time to realize that I'm a person, I'm largely driven by novelty and I love solving problems and I love talking to people. So I try to incorporate those three aspects into my life as much as I can. But it took me 25 years to realize this is who I am. This is a pattern that's played out again and again in my life. So the reason I say go back to how you were as a kid, look for your natural tendencies. What did you naturally gravitate to doing? Were you alone and sitting in the quiet corner of the room and just like writing things, or were you wanting to build things? Were you talking to everybody? And like, how were you as a young child? And then trying to see how is that pattern played out again and again and again and again and again throughout your life. Because it's just like, once I understand something, I'm good. I want to go into the next thing. So I'm like, okay, it took me a long time to see in the business world. That means I'm a good startup founder, good architect, good designer, not a good Fortune 500 CEO person where it's just a lot of like, you're managing large bureaucratic systems. Probably not the good space for me. So I don't want to go create the next unicorn because it's just not what I'd be good at. So my life is based around people, solving problems, designing things, thinking through problems, and just seeing how I can add value to the world and talking to because that's what works for me.
And that was very interesting. And I just want to make sure I'm doing my job to really bring the
Yeah.
point home and make sure listeners really understand the power in the words you just said. And that's, knowing your strengths. When it comes to
And
figuring
weaknesses.
out what your, yeah, yes, and weaknesses, I really want to drive that point home because being able to go inside and reflect on your own life experiences and recognize, as you said, these patterns in things that you tended to have strengths in, or things that were not necessarily your strong suits and might have been weaknesses. Those things
Hmm.
you outsource. Your strengths are what you lean into. So
Yep.
having that self-awareness is so important, especially when starting out. And that really
Oh.
just that I think that cuts out all the noise. It makes it really simple and allows
Hmm.
listeners to really understand, hey, like it doesn't have to be this overly complicated thing in what I pursue and how I become qualified. Like, no, there are things that I can do as a business leader, as an entrepreneur that
Hmm.
that I'm able to do through my own strengths and my personal um kind of like skill set, and it's also
Yeah.
something you develop. But I think just making that really clear that it's something that people don't have to overcomplicate necessarily, and something you can absolutely find within
Hmm.
yourself and find evidence of throughout your life experience already. That's so impactful. So thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, like it's weird. I was just having a conversation with somebody about this the other day, but if I had known that lesson when I first started, my 20s would have looked like it. What I would have had a very different career path in my 20s because my 20s were filled with fighting that and
Mm,
saying, "Oh, I know I'm good at architecting, and I know once I understand a problem, I don't obsess over it. Like I want to get to like 97% good or 80% good, and then
mhm,
I'm good, and I want to move on to the next thing. I'm not the kind of person who's going to take it and I can use this analogy because there's a lot of college kids. I'm not a speed runner. I don't obsess over the problem enough to like get those like okay, I need to like get that like extra. I don't want to do the thing 1,000 times to get that extra 2%. I'm just like, let me get it good enough, and I'm gonna hand off to a different part of the team. If I had known that when I started my entrepreneurial journey, if I had known my weaknesses and were honest, not with like the rest of the world, but just with myself about what my weaknesses were, I would have had an entirely different business. And I would have given a lot more control to my wife because I was used to joke. I was sort of aware of it because I used to joke like, without my wife basically running things, like we had a great business for 6 months and the whole thing would have collapsed.
mm,
Because she was the one who kept the train running on time. So there's another lesson in there. Like find people you trust and can believe in to complement your weaknesses. Like I've heard a lot of times where like people when they partner up, they're like, "Hey, we like doing the same things. We should work together." Like, no, 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 no. When you partner with people, especially as a new entrepreneur, and you're still figuring it out, and still like you're operating with 10 feet in fog, and or you can only see 10 feet in front of you, and everything past that is a thick wall of fog, which is every person ever. Um, you got to partner with people who are good at things you're not, because
Mm.
you guys should like complement. It's like it's the yin and the yang is really what you're looking for in a partnership. And honestly, it's just like it's exactly that. You hit the nail on the head. Understand yourself, your strengths. You can figure that out. But really, I guess if I had to summarize it, because I know I come across as very verbose, because I'm explaining my logic of like, hey guys, this is why when I say this thing, which is understand your weaknesses first, and you can figure your strengths out later. Here's why I say that, because
Mhm.
I ignored it and I didn't. I wasn't self-accepting of what my weaknesses were, and that it's going to rear its ugly head. Like you can fight your nature as much as you want. It's going to come back and like it's like I could go to the NBA and try to like guard Shaq, but if I'm not 7 feet, the nature of who I am, the nature of my reality, this physical being, the self, is going to come back and fight me again and
Mhm.
again and again. And you got to learn how to do that. And the mental game is way harder because it's not as obvious. Like you don't always know, okay, I'm not 7 feet tall, wherever the mental equivalent of that is. You just got to go do that. You got to look for the patterns and whole bunch of life lessons that would just, I guess it comes back to knowing your weaknesses and being honest about your weaknesses with yourself and with your community and everybody you talk to. For me, I guess that's another big lesson. And this is like literally just this year. Like actually in the terms we met, like we met a couple months ago, Rose, and like I
Yes,
had
we
met
did.
you just as I was trying to be honest about, hey, I'm a bionicle, I'm a builder, I'm an architect. I'm not an operator. It's not what I'm good at. Like you were some of the first people in that event we met at, which were some of the first times I was actually honest about that. So I'm 31 now. Had a birthday a couple weeks ago. So it took me 10 years to learn this lesson. So I promise you guys, if you were honest about your weaknesses and like, hey, this is what I'm good at, but this is what I'm really bad at, don't put me in this role. I promise you, the business community will be like, holy crap, this person's amazing. I want you. They're going to get recruitment offers. You're going to get partnership offers because you're honest about who you are.
Mhm.
It's weird. It's just like you hear it all the time. Oh, be authentic, be genuine, blah blah blah. But you hear just all this noise. Like, yeah, that's great, but that's branding, it's marketing. I'm a living testament. Be honest, be authentic, and it is amazing when you're honest, you're authentic, and you focus on a relationship first. It is amazing what can happen in life.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for driving that point home. And, I think we've definitely discussed in depth the importance of understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, understanding and having that self-awareness in order to reach success and find, the appropriate teams to scale your business, grow your business, and continue pushing forward in your mission. That is so, so critical. And something that I would love, and that definitely touches on the point of people management, but something that I would love to go back to that you alluded to earlier is cash management, cost management. What are things that early entrepreneurs should look out for? And maybe an
Ooh,
actionable piece of advice. I mean, you just gave so much insight into, early lessons that you learned about people management and about being honest with yourself. So how now can we turn to more of the cost side of things?
that's a great question. And I'm gonna again. So this is me being authentic.
Mhm.
I may have been a math nerd growing up, but financial and accounting is not one of my strong suits. So first off, just go start learning everything on YouTube you possibly can about cash because it is absolutely crucial. Learn what a net 90 is, net 30, 10, negative cash flow cycles. Like learn what all these things are. There are far better qualified people to teach you and talk about this stuff. Um, in the early days, you're going to be trading your time for money.
Mm.
So here's an easy example. Um, if you're trying to go quickly, or if you don't have, if you haven't raised a ton of money, like here's an example that it's going to apply to every single business, and especially new business owners. Bookkeeping sucks. It just is. Like you get paid by a sponsor, you pay for your QuickBooks, you pay for Zoom, you pay for this. It's just like, okay, Zoom is software, QuickBooks is software, sponsorship is revenue. This is it. Like just the minutia of bookkeeping. It sucks. And you can go find somebody and pay them 15, $10 an hour, $5 an hour if you go international. Like you can find somebody to pay for that for you. But then you have to think about, okay, well, that's time. Yes, I'm buying back my time, but is my revenue secure enough? And do I have, and if I do I not have, is my revenue not only secure enough, which is like I'm getting it paid consistently, but it is also spread out enough amongst enough of my clients so I don't have what's called key customer risk, which is what happened to my partner and friend of mine, which was basically we were managing for a large fund and it made up a bulk of the business. We kind of were like constantly stressing between, do we keep feeding and growing with the big client, or do we diversify and like spread our outcomes, get some smaller clients in the door? Like how much of our revenue, what percentage of our revenue comes from one client or two clients or three clients? And there isn't an easy answer. And this again comes back to who you are. What's your risk tolerance in this case? Um, even the early cash management is a risk tolerance. Like if you think you can grow fast and you're willing to, have all your time and you're willing to have a lot of overhead for a bookkeeper and early expenses like that and all these softwares, okay, do it because it's going to be your time back. But just understand you're taking on a lot of risk that if you don't meet your projections, you don't meet your sales goals, your team doesn't perform, you're gonna have to make some cuts, and that's not fun. So I guess to answer, because again, understand yourself, risk tolerance to know how much bloat do I allow for softwares, team members, early hires, um, from a cash position, from a software position, and then also just how secure is your revenue? And is your revenue coming from enough diversified sources to allow you to, get those early softwares, get those early hires to buy back your time? Because that's really what you're doing is cash management in the early days is really just time management. And do I give up money to get back time, or do I keep my money but give out my time? And
Mm.
those are the two levers you have in the early days. And there again, coming back to what I said earlier, there is no right or wrong answer. Because again, it comes back to, well, what are you trying to do? You're trying to be a unicorn. Well, you got to go raise the money or you got to go find the money somehow. And you got to buy every software, hire as many people as you possibly can because your job as the business owner is to architect the vision and to like create the SOPs and like lay out the roadmap and all this fun stuff. Your job should be get as much money as possible that you can deploy to have as much time as possible to focus on the biggest vision. But then you got investors to deal with, and that's a whole beast of it itself. You're like, hey, I'm trying to do a lifestyle business, and I just want to like make a couple hundred grand and just chill. And I want a family. I want to have hobbies. I want to do my music or my art. Like business is a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. Well, then you invest your time. Like do the bookkeeping yourself on a Saturday. Find the free versions of softwares and put the extra time into like, okay, I gotta change. I gotta do. Sometimes like it's just like there are days like Google Meet, for example, or Zoom, for example, will have like a 60-minute window. And hey, sorry guys, like I gotta close this room back up or reopen it back up because like you don't have the $10 a month or it's not worth the $10 a month, just have them at unlimited time. So it affects these little decisions once you understand what you're building toward. This is why you always start with the end in mind and understand who you are, because that will influence all your day-to-day decision making. So the cash, again, it comes to summarize, know where you're going for, and understand you have cash and you have time. Those are your two levers, and you can adjust accordingly.
Wow.
You're
Yes.
risky, your risk tolerance is high, and you can stomach a lot of risk, and you want to grow fast. Go get people. Go get your overhead rate jacked up because you can do a lot more. It's the saying: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Wow. Yes. Wow, 100%. You just dropped so many valuable points there. And, thank you for bringing it all together. One point that I really want to go back to and just reiterate for listeners, and it's that cost management is time management. And you're so right. There are many
Mhm,
trade-offs you make as an entrepreneur, going back to the idea of making those tough choices and really understanding what success means to you,
mhm,
what your end goal is, your end vision, and your end destination
mhm,
there. So thank you so much. So when it comes to money management, balancing those trade-offs, assessing your risk and
mhm.
diversifying and your client base and not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, those are
Yep,
all very important considerations when it comes to successful cost management, money management as an entrepreneur. So thank you so much for sharing those really, really, really valuable points.
absolutely.
Yeah. As we bring our conversation to a close, I want to go back to a conversation. As you mentioned, we met earlier this year, and it was at SoCal Deep Tech Week.
Yep.
And
Shout out
one
to
of our
Jay.
yes, yes, and one of our conversations that was really memorable in particular for myself and left me inspired and motivated. Thinking back to those points, you were a fierce advocate for taking action early when it comes to building a business that you have in
Yeah.
mind and reaching high and collaborating with people at the top and authorities who have the influence to help you accomplish your mission. These are two things you really emphasized during our conversation. That was a really, really
Absolutely.
impactful, pivotal conversation that I had with you. And so thinking back to those points, could you speak directly to the audience now in providing words of advice, final words of advice that they can carry forward after listening to our episode?
Absolutely. I'm going to open with something that's going to be probably throw your audience for a bit of a loop.
Mhm.
And I could skip with you because you'd already started. Um, if you were dabbling or thinking about in entrepreneurship, I would have had a conversation like what I had with the three Irish lads, which was like, you want money? There are far easier, better ways to have money. Your work-life balance is out the window. You're gonna have to fire people. You're gonna have to make uncomfortable decisions. Like your life is going to be a roller coaster ride of the best highs of your life and the lowest lows. But if you're crazy or silly enough to say, "Hey, I'm going into this," which is when I met you, you're just like, "All right, I have a podcast. I'm have this idea," then just do it. Like you can sit and talk all day long, but oh, I have this idea. Like people come to me. I was helping a friend, a new colleague, or somebody I met a couple days ago. Like, I got this idea. And I think you do this and this. I'm like, cool. Well, here's some ideas and here's some feedback of how I do it. But other than that, just go do it. Like, if you're committed to this world, you're not going to make a sale until you ask for it. Which you're not going to get the opportunity to until you just start. And especially in the early days, it's just motivation begets action, follows action. And it's a weird concept. It took me a long time to get, but you're not going to be motivated to launch your business if you are going to launch your business until you just start launching your business. And guess what? Most entrepreneurs don't really know what they're doing, present company included, which is why my 20s were so rough, which is why it comes back to start with the end. I didn't know myself. Like there's all these lessons become because I didn't know what I was doing and I was just making it up. And like, okay, well, I had an opportunity or I wanted to do something, so let me just go do it and figure it out. You know, a friend of mine was got another contact who wants to broker stuff. I'm like, great, go start calling on people. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, you got two friends in Colombia, right? Your friends are there, boots on ground. Start calling coffee distributors. It's like, okay. I'm like, yeah, you want to broker stuff? Go get a broker's deal. Like, I bet you anything. If you get a coffee shop, it's like, yeah, I need to import, 2 tons of coffee beans every month, and I want this kind of brand and this variety from Colombia. And you're like, cool. If you kind of get to a stock minimum price, I bet you anything, you're going to figure out how to actually get that Colombia in country now. But until then, you got nothing. So like, until you actually have somebody who's willing to pay you, just start. And once you're going to figure it out anyway, because that's all the entrepreneur journey is, especially as the business owner. Yeah, eventually you'll get a hang of it, but then that means okay, great. Guess what? Because a business owner's job comes down to this: is setting the layers for the current pyramid you're at. So in the beginning, you're a technician. Your job is to perform and to fulfill the work, to do the sales calls, to convert them to leads, to do the podcast, to ask the questions, to ship the product, to write the code, whatever business is. Your job is to actually do the thing. Once you have that and you've developed your SOPs around that, now your job is to start supervising other technicians. You start bringing people into.
And so really quickly, for those who don't know, what
Yeah,
is an SOP? Who might not be familiar with it?
standard operating procedure,
Great.
which is basically just like a fancy way of saying, hey, when I want to make this cup, it needs to be this many inches high. It needs to have this small here, and like just document everything down. Like,
Mhm.
hey, Rose, when you're hosting this podcast, here are the standard questions to ask. Here's the social media stuff I have to create beforehand. Here's the stuff that happens afterwards. Here's kind of like, it's documenting whatever your product is
Mm.
in a repeatable fashion, which is a whole nother fun conversation. But then your job is to supervise. And then, okay, here's how you supervise as a podcaster. Here's like, how do you start coaching and mentoring? And you just continue to move up and up in the organization and everything. But then you figure out, okay, how do you manage supervisors and how do you manage regions and how do you manage countries? And just your job is to continually be pushing the forefront of the organization. And your job is to continue to move up the pyramid, as it were. And guess what? Every time once you learn how to ship the product, great. Now you have to go find people to ship the product for you, to assemble product or put stuff in boxes. And guess what? Now you're managing people. Have you ever managed somebody before? No. Guess what you're doing? You're figuring it out. You're saying, I don't know how to do this, but I have 10 orders I need to ship out this week and I need help doing this. Or I have a deadline to meet so I can ship this code to somebody. I've never hired a software engineer before, but I'm doing it now. That's the reality of being an entrepreneur is you just have to keep doing the thing.
Mhm.
You got this massive flywheel going. It took so much effort to get going, but now that it's going, you're along for the ride. And you're not always going to know. Because again, most every human, every person alive, is a fallacy we forget, is we're constantly living our life only being able to see 10 feet in front of us, and 11 feet beyond is a massive thick wall of fog that you'll never be able to see. You can look behind you and be like, oh wow, yeah, the path is totally clear. I see everything. But looking forward, you're never going to have all the answers. You're always going to be able to have like about 10 feet of good vision. And so, for an early entrepreneur, if you're really getting into this world, just start, get comfortable being uncomfortable, not having all the information, having a deadline. Like, I have this contract I need to fulfill, and I have no idea how to fulfill it. Guess what? You're going to have to figure it out. I now have an office of 5 people. I got to make payroll this week. I don't know how I'm going to make it because I only have 80% of the money I need. You're going to figure it out. I have an investor who wants to pull out or wants to give me all this. I had a problem where like I had a soft commitments of $1 million and no idea how to legally take the money. Guess what I did? I figured it out. All I knew about raising money was like seeing stuff in Wall Street, in TV, the large fund we managed for, but no actually had actually processed the money, and then SEC sending people to jail because they didn't take the money properly. Like, well, I know which of those buckets I want to be in and which ones I don't. I don't know what to do here. I'm going to figure it out.
Mhm.
And that's what an entrepreneur, that is the reality of being an entrepreneur, is you're just constantly making it up. One of my good friends and mentors, Michael, said it perfectly that if you're not constantly suffering from imposter syndrome, you're not growing and you're failing as an entrepreneur.
Mm.
Entrepreneur.
Wow.
Maybe,
Thank
but that's
you.
his version of reality.
Yeah.
Again, because he is trying to grow and like achieve billion-dollar company status. As a
Mhm.
lifestyle entrepreneur, like, hey, my job is like, I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I want to have family. I want to have lots of kids. I want to homeschool them. You should not be feeling entrepreneur syndrome, imposter syndrome forever. You should for a little bit to achieve the financial metrics you want. And then your business should enter a coast mode where it's just like, cool, I got my systems down and I have my arms around this and I'm making the money I want. And my job is now just to chill and enjoy and to go live your life. But if you're trying to grow and like be the next Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whatever the pick your richer brains to pick your business idol, you need to be constantly feeling an imposter syndrome. And if you're not okay with that, you're going to have a rough time. But that's the reality of being an entrepreneur. You're never going to feel like you know everything. So just start and get used to it.
Thank you. That was really, really valuable. And just after our entire conversation today, you just left us with two very, very critical thinking points. One, just get started. And two, you're going to learn as you go. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, you don't feel like you have to know everything because you're not going to have all the answers up front. The analogy that I
You're never
really
going to.
loved before earlier in this conversation was when you mentioned your earlier experiences in your career journey had been a pattern of jumping out of planes and building the parachute on the way down. I think that
Mm-hmm.
just captures the uncertainty, but the action in spite of the fear and action despite
Mm-hmm.
the uncertainty so well. I think that just captures the
Ooh,
entire entrepreneurial experience. So thank you so much. Yeah, for sharing those two really.
absolutely. You hit it perfectly of like acting in spite of. I was no, again, my ideal life, my life is going to networking events, building relationships with people. So it's like, well, I'm really afraid. I'm like talking to a girl, is like, she's a good technician, she's doing good work. Is like, I'm thinking about hiring my first employee, but I'm afraid. Guess what? We're always afraid. That fear never goes. If you don't feel fear, you're either something's wrong with you or you don't understand what you're doing. Because if you don't feel fear about hiring your first employee and like, are they going to care as much as me, which they're not? Are they going to do as good as enough a job as me, which they're not? If you don't feel that fear, you don't fully appreciate and respect your clients or your customers enough to actually do a good job. So you hit it perfectly on the nail on the head. It's acting in spite of the fear because that fear is never ever going to go. I'm still afraid to this day. I'm always worried, like my business, even once you're successful, even once you have a business established, now your fears morph from can I do this to, oh my God, what happens if this falls apart? What happens if my clients leave? What happens if all my employees quit? What happens if my partner dies? What happens if I get sick and I can't fulfill the business? Like your fears are just always going to be there and they're just going to change and evolve as you grow.
Mm,
Also, real quick, I wanted to kind of circle back on the comment about just getting started. I want to clarify what I say by that is go get a sale.
mm,
Because until a sale is made, you have nothing. You don't have a business. So when I say go get started, it's not, oh, go build a website. It's no, Rose, you want to have a podcast? Guess what? You need to go get podcast guests. You need to go get a transaction. You want to build a tech startup? great. Start writing the code or start finding out somebody who's willing to pay you $1 today to be your first early adopter. And I actually like, oh, they put on a wait list. Like, no, hey, let's say you wanted to launch a platform to connect podcast guests because Rose, you're trying to grow a podcast. Chris, if I was trying to create a top tech platform, like, hey, Rose, I want to launch a podcast. I want to launch a tech platform to bring you all the podcast guests you could ever want. Is that interesting? Be like, oh yeah, man, I love it. Hey, great. Guess what, Rose? If you're willing to give me $1 today, in exchange for something, some lifetime membership, discount, you figure out whatever your business is, would you be willing to do that? And then actually go get 5 or 10 people to, yeah, I'll give you $1. Because if they give you $1, they give you more. But now you have a sale and now you have a business. So it's not just, oh, let me go build a website, let me go get business cards.
Mhm.
Like it's all, who cares? You do that once you have a sale. So when I say get started, go get a sale, which depends on your business.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying that point there, and really, really, really bringing it home and putting it all together for the audience today. Matt, you have shared so many valuable gems today. Just such great wisdom and insight into your experience as an entrepreneur, up until today. So thank you so much for your time on the show, and.
My pleasure. I know
Yeah,
I don't know what time it is, but I'm sure we're
yeah,
way over.
yeah.
And I try to condense everything down. So there's a lot of underlying logic that has to get imparted. So just go watch everything you can on YouTube. Go re-listen to all Rose's podcast episodes. I'm sure there's lots of other guests who are like also sharing their great nuggets of wisdom. Listen on 1.5, 2x speed, and just learn as much as you possibly can.
Yes.
And then just go ship. Go get a sale.
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you also for just providing such a detailed account of your experience, breaking down the reasoning, breaking down the steps and the processes to all of the advice that you have given the audience throughout our conversation today. You
Mhm.
provided the clear, unfiltered truth and are telling our listeners what they need to hear to prepare for the actual realities ahead if they choose to pursue
Mhm.
entrepreneurship. And just so many great, valuable, impactful, hard-hitting points you made today. And to end our conversation, I
Yep.
do want to emphasize how you mentioned acting despite the fear is one of the most important things you can
Mhm.
do. And that, if I can just close off by saying, that is part of the entrepreneurial experience, is part of what it means to build your own
Mhm.
business, to have the courage to build and pursue something that not everyone has the ability to see for yourself, for themselves. So thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for all of the valuable advice, the actionable advice, and I wish
My
you the
pleasure.
best of luck going forward.
Thank you very much, Rose. Thanks for having me. I hope everybody enjoyed the podcast today and said it perfectly. Thanks,
Thanks, Matt.
everybody.
And where can and before we hop off the call, where can
Mhm.
students go if they would like to connect with you one-on-one?
Just find me on LinkedIn. Like
Great.
my name will be somewhere
Okay.
on the show notes. Like I don't have a company name to give because I'm part of being an entrepreneur. I'm in transition. I'm figuring out kind of what my next big venture is and working on a couple of things in private. But so just kind of on LinkedIn. That's always the best way.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Matt. And yes, for everyone listening, right now, Matt's information will be in the show notes. So stay tuned for that. So thank you so much, Matt, and best of luck.
Thank you. And everybody go listen to all Rose's episodes.